Most of the time, what people recommend to beginning reef keepers who are setting up a new tank is to leave their lights off during the nitrogen cycle and the ugly phase. But what if I told you that this is actually holding your tank back, making it take longer to reach stability and maturity than if you left the lights on during this period of the tank's life? In this video, we're going to cover why people leave the lights off or say to do so, why it might be better to leave your lights on, and at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some tips that are going to speed things up and make sure that you at least should have more success after this period of the tank's life is over. So the reason that people recommend leaving your lights off during this phase of the tank's life basically comes down to one thing: fear. Fear of the ugly phase, fear of the tank turning brown and not looking good or looking undesirable, fear of growing photosynthetic organisms like algae and bacteria that you really don't want in your aquarium, although the argument can be made that you really do want them, and basically just fear of the tank not looking good through this part. But that part is important. It's important in that time in the tank's life for these organisms to be establishing themselves, and the microbiome is becoming alive and being populated with all of these different organisms. Leaving the lights off dampens this process. Most of the time, what we see showing up during this part are the brown things, the diatoms. That's why we call it the ugly phase. The tank turns brown, and really people don't like how it looks. But it's very, very important to get the tank through this process. Grow these diatoms. They're going to consume all of the excess silicates that have been put in the aquarium when you set the tank up. Maybe you used tap water, maybe you didn't. It came in on the rocks and the sand and all the other things. They're going to consume this stuff up, and then they're going to die back in population. And that dieback is a key indicator, a visual indicator for you that the tank is through this phase and you can move on to the next stage of the tank's life, add more fish, because you should have some in at this point already, but add more fish, begin adding cleaners, and begin adding corals. It's the easiest way to determine if your tank is ready to take on that next stage of biology, because if it's not ready yet, adding those things is going to be detrimental or potentially ultimately result in the loss of those things because the tank isn't ready to support them yet. So leaving the lights on is going to allow these organisms to begin to proliferate. Let me give you an example. You guys know I love analogies. You're getting ready for baseball season. Season's been closed. It's been done since last year, and now it's time to start prepping again. Do they wait to start prepping the field until the day of the first game of the season? No, they don't. They begin prepping the field months in advance. That way, when the teams show up and it's finally time to play the first game of the season, the field is ready. It's visually appealing. Everything looks good. The baselines are crisp. I used to play baseball. Memories. Anyway, all of that is ready to go, and your tank is no different. If you leave the lights off during the cycle in the ugly phase, you are stopping the tank from growing the photosynthetic organisms on the rocks, like the algae and the bacteria that are going to support your cleanup crew when you add your cleanup crew. Your cleanup crew, or kook as we like to call it, have to have something to eat. And until you turn the lights on in the aquarium, none of that stuff is going to grow. This is why people often see when they add their cleaners after the ugly phase, they die off in a week or two. It's because they don't have anything to eat because the lights weren't on during this time of the process. Now listen, every tank is going to experience some ugly phase. Yours might be worse than mine, or yours might be a little bit easier and better than mine, but every tank is going to go through it. There is this maturation process that happens whereby these organisms grow, and some of them are photosynthetic. Having a little bit of algae and some diatoms, maybe even a little cyano, some green hair algae, stuff like that, showing up in your tank at this time is not a sign of failure or that you did anything wrong. It's a sign that it's time to begin moving to the next stage of the tank's life. It's time to add your cleanup crew, or at least begin adding your cleanup crew. Don't go all ham on it and add 500 members of cleanup crew as soon as you see one speck of algae. Don't do that, but add 3 or 4. And then 2 months later, add 5 or 6 more, so on and so forth. I meant to say weeks, not months. Brain things. It's literally the biology of your tank beginning to do the things that we want it to do. And without lights, that's not going to happen. So, by leaving the lights off during this part of the process, you're only delaying the inevitable and slowing your tank and yourself down from getting to that point where everyone wants to be, where the corals are growing great and the tank is looking super good. It's literally prolonging the maturity and the stability of the tank from taking place. And nobody wants that. This is why I always, in every situation, every time I set up a tank, I run my tank with the lights on through the nitrogen cycle and the ugly phase, just like I was going to have them on during the tank's life when it has coral in it. Although I only run them for half the time. I don't want to go complete, crazy here and just blast a brand new tank with 500 par, 600 par of lighting, but I definitely want light going in the tank so that those things can begin to grow. Now, earlier at the beginning of the video, I said I was going to give you some tips for this point in the tank's life to help you succeed and become a more advanced reef keeper. And here they are. And actually, I already said one, reducing that photo period by half down to 4 or 5 hours, something like that's going to provide enough light to the aquarium that any photosynthetic thing can begin to start doing its thing, but not so much that those things get out of hand. And you don't want to run your lights at 100% either. 50, 60% for about half the time you're planning on running them in the end is plenty at this point. There is some stock in what people say about not running the lights during this part of the tank's life. And if you overdo it, you can definitely grow some nuisance algae a lot faster than you want to. But having them on is definitely beneficial. Another tip for this stage in the tank's life is not to overfeed the tank or add too much livestock too early. You got to remember, you're starting with almost nothing unless you use live sand and live rock from an established source or from the ocean, which I would that's the next tip. Anyway, you're basically starting from almost nothing, and your bacterial biome has to go like this. So you add fish after the cycle, your bacteria begin to catch up to the fish, everything's trickling along, you add some cleaners, and the bacteria have to catch up like this. It's not a parallel thing. As you add things, the bioload increases, and the need for the tank to be able to process the waste from that bioload also increases, but it takes time to get there. So don't add all of the fish that you want to add right off the rip. 2 here, 2 there, and go forward like that. What was the thing that I just said I was going to talk? Live sand and live rock from the ocean or an established aquarium source is one of the, if not the best thing that we can put in our tanks. You're going to want to subscribe to the channel because here very soon, it's on the way now. In fact, I have an aquabiomics test coming. I'm going to test this tank and find out what the bacteriological makeup is of this tank. It really hasn't had that much biologically put into it since I set it up. Steady, slow and steady. I'm practicing what I'm preaching here. But the tank is now it has a few corals in it and they look good. So it's time to ramp it up and take it to the next stage so that I can turn this tank into the tank that you guys want to see it become. And so what I'm going to do is aquabiomics test the tank. We're going to find out what the bacteria makeup looks like. And then I'm going to put Tampa Bay live rock in it. I'm going to get Marco rock and put that in the sump. I'm going to get corals from a whole bunch of different people and pack it in the tank. And I'm going to do all of this stuff. And then we're going to update it with another aquabiomics test in about 4, 5, or 6 months from now. So you're going to want to see that. Subscribe. And my last tip for this stage of your aquarium's life that's going to help you get through it is to stop trying to micromanage the tank right now. You're going to want to let the tank mature. The numbers are going to do some crazy stuff. Now, that doesn't mean don't test your tank. Okay, test the tank, and as long as the numbers are within the ranges that we consider safe at this point right now, don't try to adjust them too much, with the exception of nitrates and phosphates. If your nitrates and phosphates are zero after the ugly phase, it means the rocks are sucking them up. And I just made a video on that with recommendations about what you're going to want to do in that situation. And that video is right there on the screen. If you go check that out, you're going to find some good information. And I'm going to see you over there.